A very happy evening. My name is Rajan Iyer. In about 2 months from now, we will be celebrating our 70th year of independence. I thought I would take this opportunity to share with you some thoughts I've held on for a long time, with some new additions made to those thoughts since then. At an age past 80, I will not have a great length of time now on to do so. The points I present for your consideration are entirely my own. Conceivably, we may have as many different opinions as would be the number of people listening to me. This is quite understandable, and I'm hoping that under quintessential theme I seek to project, you could perhaps see oneness and objectivity. Conceivably, too, there could well be others who may have nurtured thoughts as I do, and may even have given expression to these in writings or in lectures that would be coincidental. There is still a strong school of thought among some of us that would suggest that as a society we were neither ready nor equipped to accept, nurture, and cradle our independence in 1947. We were caught in the vortex of a turmoil. Our thoughts were clouded by the proximate problems on hand pre- and post-independence. A very charismatic political leadership courses through the initial years, presenting us with a promise of a bright future for all Indians. With due respect to our freedom fighters and other most revered national leaders, we need to accept, 70 years through independence now, that we then lacked the essentially needed acumen, political and administrative, to take the country forward as a whole within a reasonable time scale and within a democratic framework which were accepted as ideal for our own governance. A democracy is governance of the people, by the people, and for the people. Could we all put our hands on our chest and honestly say to ourselves that we have almost always had governments through these past 60 years that worked for people at large in full awareness of complex issues faced by a very divergent society? If that had indeed been the case, I'm sure we would not see amidst 1.3 billion people that we Indians are now, that we still have about 300 million people who are below poverty at $1.25 earnings per day. Most in this category are uneducated, and most do not know where their next meals would come from. We need to acknowledge, in deep gratitude, the humanitarian work being done by several homegrown NGOs and others from situations abroad who are engaged in and committed to eradicating poverty, bringing Medicare and education for the downtrodden in our society. But the problem of poverty is humongous, not just in India, but in several other countries too, particularly the African continent, even in some of the developed countries, howsoever minimally that may be. Allow me to cite a small incident out of pages of my own experience. One day early in 1980s, I was alone in my suite at the Dorset Hotel in New York, where I had been on work for my office. For want of anything else to do after dinner, I put the TV on. In one of the channels I listened to, an American calling upon fellow Americans so movingly and so passionately, pleading with them for funds to be sent to faraway NGO based out of today's Kolkata, then it was Calcutta, to Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity. I could not restrain tears falling down my eyes, arising from this intimate realization that thousands of miles away we are people empathetic to dispossession in faraway India. Going back to our childhood days, I do recollect we were taught the philosophy of contentment, that is, to learn to be happy and contented with whatever we have. I don't know if this thought inculcated in young formative minds, in incorrect perspectives, interfered with essential, healthy aspirations towards certain progress in quality of life, that could be achieved only through work with clarity in vision and minimally needed economic levels. The bunch of grapes that the cunning fox could not reach had always been sour for it. The fine thread of unity that seemed to connect the immense diversity that India was and is was perhaps taken to be as strong and abiding. Perhaps again, every Indian was thought to be an Indian patriot, in many ways reflecting the revered collective leadership of the times I referred to. And it was thought too that the buoyant enthusiasm then prevailing amidst us as a society would help us build a strong India, where every Indian in every nook and cranny of the subcontinent would have sufficient enough food, clothing and shelter, and little more to go by, where decent life in dignity need not be the consequence of continuing drudgery. Freedom of the individual is, inter alia, basic to democracy. Continuing uninhibited, unhindered expression of such freedom is its sustenance. Benevolent manifestations of such continued expression as would touch every citizen is its success. Can these thoughts be validated in the context of about 300 million people who are below poverty in our country? What does freedom mean to a hungry man who does not know where his meals will come from? Indian society is divided and subdivided into innumerable compartments based on language, religion, caste, creed, social and economic barriers. Such a divisionism is accentuated by conditions of poverty, illiteracy, obscurantism, suppression of women and such other factors. We lack consequently a degree of what I may call as collective national discipline, so very vital for democracy to deliver. Barring the freedom movement, I am not sure if there had been a common platform for all Indians to get together for a period in time. This, combined with divisionism I spoke of, naturally led to group loyalties, perhaps a lack of Indianness, and may add hero worship. Or to put it differently, Indianness, if it obtained, was somehow subservient to group loyalties based out of religion or language or some other local bondage. Was it not ever possible for our society to be galvanized into oneness of its own volition or conscious intent rather than some compulsive extraneous factors such as a war in the country or some natural calamity or whatever? The inadequacies in liberal education, moral and patriotic attunement in the early stages of education as it obtained over time are significant factors too, amongst others, that contributed to what we are today, a society where we experience inequity and glaring disparity. Voluntary individual participation through the ballot box and the public platform is the bedrock of democracy. But as it obtains, adult franchise in India is woefully wanting in what I say as just earnestness, because the following factors amongst others. A good part of our electorate is primarily concerned with eking a livelihood and in most cases therefore incapable of looking beyond the immediate family unit. Incapable, in many cases, in being able to decide what's right for collective good within groups, and can easily be swayed by opinionated talks with ulterior motives during elections. Most sensitively exposed to the lure of money, and entire electorates can easily be bought over, essentially because money thus received can take care of some meals at least. Blissfully ignorant of our own country, its varied and vibrant cultures, customs, manners, and traditions, how the country is governed, what are one's rights and duties. Perhaps too incapable of voicing grievances strongly enough and convincingly enough on a public platform because that happens to be unavailable to them. that and many more. Democracy can flourish if certain basic preconditions obtain for its success. When they do not exist, or minimally if they do, we cannot hope to have governance by the people and for the people. Because of selfishness, greed for power and pelf, hero worship, many political parties that evolved in India are such that the foundation for one, in many cases, is antagonism towards another, rather than some genuine national or local concerns. Would an Indian who has true patriotism vibrant in every sinew of his being ever be happy of having discharged his calling by casting his vote to such a party? When candidates belong to such parties get elected to power, we may not get governance that can be ideal or at least close to it, as can address complex issues that we already are confronted with, or that which keep cumulatively multiplying with changing times. Incidentally, we are told that there are about 1,800 parties registered in India. Almost 70 years into independence, what truly are we independent from? We need to look at ourselves collectively, not through colored prisms. We need to objectively introspect and endeavor to discern whatever went wrong and where along much of this period in independent India, and pitch our realization or revelation in the background of a rich and unbroken culture that goes back in time to evolved civilizations that flourished from Vedic period. Though the format of democratic governance came in from the West, the basic principles for participatory growth, which also espoused women empowerment, were ingrained in our ancient wisdom. I have not read in the Vedas, but the following two shining examples come to mind. In the ancient system of Gurukulam, the Guru and the Shishya recite a prayer before the beginning of each learning lesson, generally conducted under the shades of trees. The prayer, as most would know, is Sahana Bhavadu, Sahana Bhunattu, Sahaviryam Karavavai, Tejasvina Vadhidamastu, Ma Vidvishavai, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Briefly, the ending says, let's engage in productive discussion in the event of any difference of opinion opening up between us. The Guru would seem to concede that the Shishya could grow beyond his own self in knowledge. Should as a result any difference crop up in the process of learning, the prayer is made so as to be endowed with the needed wisdom to understand each other on perceived differences through discussion. The second is what comes to us through a Malayalam poetry, reflecting the times when King Mahabali ruled the regions we now call Kerala. Maveli Nadu Vanidum Kalam, Manushyarellarum Onnu Pole, Kallavamilla Chadiyamilla, Ellolamilla Polivajanam. Again, the fine seeds of democracy maturing into beautiful feast for the senses, actualized transactional values of governance and social conduct. When the poet says, Manushyarellarum Onnu Pole, what he seeks to convey is this: people were very happy, there existed no great disparity, and equity obtained in society. He goes on to add many details. I don't remember the entire poem, such as there were no thefts, no one cheated, no one spoke lies, etc. Many times over, we have seen unruly conduct in legislative assemblies, where even senior legislators come to blows, throwing chairs, breaking up mics, making a mockery of the political temples a citizen is supposed to worship. Let's ask ourselves, how many of our elected representatives can honestly stake claim to knowing or understanding our own constitution in word and in spirit? How many of them know the British and the American constitutions, from which our own has drawn inspiration and the foundational work, besides the basics arising from our own ancient wisdom? How many of them know, to reasonable levels at least, the history and geography of the world, especially of our own country? How many of them can communicate well enough to the listeners in ways that respect current value systems? Could we call ourselves a true democracy where MPs and MLAs elected to public offices, largely by the poorer sections in society, the illiterate category in society, who could be bought en masse for money or articles for personal use such as TVs, laptops, cookers, microwaves, etc. Going by repeated reporting in the media, would you be wrong in thinking that most contest elections so as to build their own private wealth in scant regard to sensibilities of the electorate that pitch them to power? That many become millionaires within short time cycles of holding public offices is a fact that can be verified through the Right to Information Act. Becoming millionaires is most welcome, but through the right means. In fact, what a grand positioning it would be if the entire population of this country could become millionaires through equitable opportunities made available and adequately explored. And why not, for heaven's sake? Let me bring in Japan into this discussion, as I have visited this country many times on business, though only once on a holiday with my family. The country's population is about 126 plus million, as against India's population of 1,310 plus million. Japan has a landmass of 3,77,970 square kilometers, as against India's landmass of 32,87,265 square kilometers. Approximately 2/3 of Japan would be hills and dales, unfit for agriculture, human habitation, or industry. India's present workforce alone, of about 487 million people, is almost 4 times the entire population of Japan. Encrusted deep into the bowels of Mother Earth in Japan are about 108 active volcanoes. This country is exposed to about 600 seismic disturbances a year, some notching up to 8 plus in the Richter scale. The only natural resources Japan can stake claim to would be some sunlight, the seas and the seafood, some agriculture, and minuscule quantity of metal as such. No oil, no coal, and no such other wealth. In India, we have been blessed with a wide variety of natural wealth: oil, coal, manganese, silicon, iron ore, gold, silver, metals and minerals, agriculture, fruits and vegetables, cotton, the spices, other forms of forest wealth, the seasons, the manpower resources, etc. The unidentified part of our own wealth under the bowels of dear Mother Earth can perhaps be more than the identified parts. Japan was decimated towards the end of the Second World War with the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and conventional bombing of other parts of cities including Tokyo. Japanese society had generally been uniquely ethnic and uniquely cohesive, but the destruction and devastation that the country endured evidently galvanized Japan with a decisive determination to rise colossus-like on economic front. Within 3.5 or 4 decades since, Japan Incorporated, soon to occupy a number 2 position in economic power in the world after the United States. Japan set up many factories, especially automobile, in several parts of the United States, thus contributing significantly not only to the GDP of this country, but at once also providing employment to thousands upon thousands of Americans. Until about 12 years or so ago, for a few years until then, Japan had as many as between 140 to 153 companies in the Fortune 500 list. During most of this period, India had just one company in this list, the Indian Oil Corporation. The Japanese companies represented a true cross-section of industry: oil processing and distribution, power, steel, automobile, chemicals, banking, insurance, food processing, electronics, communications, infrastructure, shipbuilding, and such others. During the 7 decades since independence, given the immense quantum and variety of natural resources and human potential, we should have grown several times beyond what Japan could achieve. Did we need an outside threat of a war or some natural catastrophe of immense magnitude to galvanize us into action? China's economic success is a fairly recent history. With a population similar to that of ours, poverty in this country has come down to less than 78 million, as against ours still at 300 million. The collective wisdom of a good part of the world has yet not made us acknowledge, understand, and appreciate that nature did not intend the nations should be independent of each other. Nature intended us to be interdependent, going by the very manner in which our natural and mineral wealth is so widely distributed all across the world. Nature intended us to explore the possibility of sharing our wealth with others, and thereby let us all grow together to happiness, peace, and well-being. We have not learned the basic lessons that nature gave us. Japan became aware of this imperative a long time ago. Here is a country where even vegetables, fruits, and flowers have got to be imported, raw materials besides, to run their industry. It is predicated that by 2050, Japan may have to import humans into the country to run their factories. Yet again, the collective wisdom of a good part of the world has not made us to acknowledge, understand, and appreciate this basic truth. All of us are creations of one supreme power, whichever name we choose to call the supreme power, as God or any other name. Little do we realize that killing another or harming another, because of differences in the way we look, the language we speak, or because of faith we subscribe to, is causing deep hurt to the causative principle of all. Every child arriving into this beautiful planet of ours has already been provisioned for, with a space to be, to grow, and be in consonance with nature all through life, as long as that possibility is not snatched away by others. History is replete with stories of how groups of people trounced upon others to gain control over them and take away what rightly belonged to them. We may not go into the details here, and there may not any need for it to be. The facts are easily accessible from archives of history. In the 21st century now, one would like to think the world has become rather more civilized, and that has been a long way from slavery, bonded labor, colonization, mutual distrust, the Iron Curtain, etc., to come together on a common platform to address concerns of ecology so as to preserve our dear planet, and also to ensure that we are secure from any streaking space debris hitting the earth. What I reach up to would be the following thoughts for your consideration. The first and foremost point I make is this: for any profession, or for most professions, one will need to undergo a certain training, cultivating a person into a job groove, if you like, so he or she is able to perform well at optimum level. This would be so for a carpenter, a mason, a tailor, a teacher, a doctor, a social worker, an engineer, a research person, a driver, a motorman, or an astronaut. Ad infinitum. My question is simply this: why should there be an exception in case of people aspiring for political offices? In fact, in case of such people, the training should be more intensive and extensive. in a democratic situation, what they do or they do not do will affect millions. Arising from that argument, I move on to plead with the powers that be, that we create very special institutions, even as we have done for varied streams of professional education, such as the IIMs and the IITs across the country, with a master's program designed for completion in 3 years. We then declare to ourselves by an appropriate amendment to the Constitution that only such people who undertake this particular course and excel in it be allowed to contest elections. I do recognize that there is a small body of opinion that is not in favor of special education for politicians. As I mentioned in the opening remarks in this speech, there could be varied opinions on the subject, but essentially we are better off with governance by a specially educated lot than by people who are not so educated. If we were to study the US Congress today, it will be discerned that out of 541 members, about 170 are with law degree, about 80 plus with masters in business administration, about 30 with PhDs, and mostly all others with a minimum of graduation through the college. I suggest that candidates aspiring for political offices have a level of personal conduct above the electoral average. They need to be people with basic wherewithal to live comfortably by, so that work in the political field does not become their bread and butter. They would need to be subjected to the rigorous mill of examination for personal conduct, should have a high sense of selfless dedication and commitment. They should be people of proven merit in areas of humane work and human progress. With that, I also suggest that there must be an age to enter and an age to retire. If in all other job-related situations, society has conclusively accepted the person ought to retire between 58 and 62, depending local situations and other factors, that have been done on the basis of a deeply researched analysis that seeks to determine that faculties tend to fray past that age and one is no longer able to work as well as during the preceding years. Why should we have an exception in the case of people holding public offices or political offices? Those who retire can, if they wish to, form a special advisory college whose collective wisdom of working in the field of politics can be made available to younger generation who shoulder that responsibility. Our present Prime Minister, Narendra Modi ji, has done extremely well in efforts at eradicating corruption, addressing concerns of terrorism, employment generation, advancing the digital possibilities, got many foreign companies mesmerized with the slogan of Make in India, which is proving a success. All that and much more against much opposition. I am sure he gets his inner strength from a source which must be traced back to a certain discipline in everyday conduct in life he still subscribes to. That gets me to the word opposition. In true political parlance, opposition parties are to enable and support the ruling party, sorting out differences in approach to common problems through discussions. Psychologically, though, the word opposition seems to affect what would otherwise be a constructive approach to a given issue. We could not be opposing simply because we happen to be on the opposition side. I have always toyed with the idea of coining another word to replace opposition. I have never understood how someone who grew up in a particular area where he or she is known could contest elections in an entirely different part of the country. If the candidate is supposed to cater to the special needs of an electorate, how could this need be met when he or she is elected from a different constituency. Women empowerment has gone some way, but is still a long way to go, especially in the villages. It is heart-rending to hear occasional news of a sati or black magic or doing away with a girl child in a remote part of the country. Such unfortunate happenings again underscore the need for liberal education to be made accessible to interior most parts of the country where none exist. In several job situations of multitasking, women have proven themselves better than men. Given that position, by not enabling innate talent in women to be brought forth through supportive understanding into daily transactional situations, society would lose very heavily. I don't know if any other country in the world has such wide variety as we have in India. Be that music, dance, drama, forms of performing arts, food, dressing, festivals, other celebrations, languages highly evolved with poetry and prose, ways of living, the temples, the churches, the synagogues and the mosques, the seasons, the rains and the snow, the flora and the fauna, inviting nature with ever-changing hues of greens, the hills and the dales, and the rivers. I might venture to suggest that it could take a person several decades to comprehend all there is to know and to appreciate and enjoy in what is extant in others within the country. What a wondrous India! Rather than engaging ourselves in mutual appreciation, which necessarily will beget a bonding bounty, some political parties at least seem to be emphasizing the differences between groups based on language or caste or creed, etc., and thereby bringing about artificial divisions in society that destroys cohesiveness, which is most unfortunate. We should be proud that this country is the only country in the world to receive foreign remittances that runs into billions of dollars, suggesting thereby as to how strong family ties are. Of all the states, I think it is Kerala that receives the maximum remittances of our foreign exchange. It is not an important institution in our society that can be capitalized on to elevate ourselves to higher reaches in quality of life for all. Before I conclude, may I, in great humility, draw attention of my listeners to some of the statements made by great thinkers who contributed significantly to world civilization as we have this today. Max Muller, who lived in India for some years so as to study Vedic culture and Sanskrit literature, had this to say: if we were to look over the whole world to find out the country most richly endowed with all the wealth, power and beauty that nature can bestow, in some parts a very paradise on earth, I should point to India. If I were asked under what sky the human mind is most fully developed in some of the choicest gifts, has most deeply pondered on the greatest problems of life, and has found solutions to some, which well deserve the attention even of those who have studied Plato and Kant, I should point to India. And if I were to ask myself from what literature we here in Europe, we who have been nurtured almost exclusively on the thoughts of Greeks and the Romans and of one Semitic race, the Jewish, may draw that corrective which is most wanted in order to make our inner life more perfect, more comprehensive, more universal, in fact more truly human, a life not for this life only, but a transfigured and eternal life. Again, I should point to India. Warren Hastings spoke of Indians in general. They are gentle and benevolent, more susceptible of gratitude for kindness shown to them, and less prompted to vengeance for wrongs inflicted than any people on the face of the earth, faithful, affectionate, submissive to legal authority. Some ancient kings of China are said to have written, and I quote, "The Indians known to all nations for many centuries are the metal, the wisdom, the source of fairness and objectivity. They are people of sublime pensiveness, universal epilogues, and useful and rare inventions. To their credit, Indians have made great strides in the study of numbers and of geometry. They have acquired immense information and reached the zenith of the knowledge about movements of the stars. After all, they have surpassed all other people in their knowledge of medical sciences." Lin Yutang, a Chinese scholar and author, wrote, "India was China's teacher in trigonometry, quadratic equations, grammar, phonetics, and so forth." Voltaire stated, "Everything has come down to us from the banks of the Ganges." Dr. David Gray, summarizing math-centric developments in India, is reported to have quoted names and contributions of Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, Mahavira, Bhaskara, and Madhava, and concluded, "The role played by India in development of the scientific revolution in Europe is no mere footnote, easily and inconsequentially swept under the rug of Eurocentric bias. To do so is to distort history and to deny India one of its greatest contributions to world civilizations." American scholar Jabez Sunderland, 1840-1936, President of India Information Bureau of America, spent some years in India, said in his book, India in Bondage, "India created the beginnings of all sciences, and she carried some of them to a remarkable degree of development, thereby leading the world. India has produced great literature, great arts, great philosophical systems, great religions, and great men in every department of life, rulers, statesmen, financiers, scholars, poets, generals, colonizers, skilled artisans, and craftsmen of every kind, agriculturists, industrial organizers, and leaders in far-reaching trade, commerce, by land and sea." He went on to say, "India was a far greater industrial and manufacturing nation than any in Europe or than any other in Asia. Her textile goods, the fine products of her loom in cotton, wool, linen, and silk, were famous all over the world. So were her exquisite jewelry, her precious stones cut in every lovely form. So were her pottery, porcelains, ceramics of every kind, quality, color, and beautiful shape. So too were her fine works in metal, iron, steel, silver, and gold. She had great architecture, equal in beauty to any in the world. Yes, we can all rise up to higher zeniths of living and glory. I think we need a kind of moral regeneration to move in that direction. We can build India where goodness, joy, happiness, bliss can touch every single citizen. We need to be ready to confront strains, stresses, and sacrifices if they come along in the way for a period. We need a collective sense of will, of direction, and of purpose. We need to tell every Indian of these needs so that all of us jointly can make a tryst with our own collective inner conscience. Destiny is not outside of ourselves. Destiny is what we create for us in hope and in conviction. Thank you so much. for listening to me.